Do you want to bust your sales quota? Do you want to join the ranks of top 1% high-tech sellers? The Top 1% Sellers Factory podcast gives you the insights and the tools to help you achieve your sales greatness. The podcast features sales and services professionals, leaders, and experts to give you the edge you're looking for. Here's your host, Ash Seddeek.
Welcome, everyone. This is the Top 1% Sellers Factory podcast, and I have an amazing guest today. Rebecca Bell from Cisco Systems will be sharing with us her thoughts on what is happening in the sales profession, how things are changing from her own viewpoints, and what top sellers need to do to succeed in this market, understand how to establish and grow the relationships with customers, and really succeed at the very end by achieving those customers' outcomes. Before we get any deeper, I'd like for Rebecca to introduce herself to you, tell you a bit more about her own background, and then we'll delve into our interview questions. Rebecca.
Thanks, Ash. Thank you. It's great to be here. Thanks for asking me to join the podcast. I really appreciate it. So my background is very non-typical for somebody who works in a technology company and in that arena. I'm actually an English literature graduate. I think that might be something that we have in common.
Yes. Exactly.
And so I'm not technology focused or driven necessarily, but what I am driven by is around making kind of purposeful connections with audiences through communications and having the right strategy. So my career has kind of taken me in that direction, from university reading a lot of books through to a career in public relations, corporate communications in various organizations, and finally landing in Cisco about 9.5 years ago, where I've had a number of different roles, from executive communications, which is a kind of practice area its own right in Cisco, through to marketing, through to sales acceleration, and also sales enablement, which is obviously critically important in organizations which have got a very sales-driven culture. So kind of bringing all that opportunity together now in my current role at Cisco in digital transformation, where I'm looking at customer engagement and sales enablement as two key practice areas.
That's fascinating evolution. I think it just talks to how much one needs to adapt to continue to grow, which is awesome. Well, I'm definitely glad to have you here, Rebecca. And we'll go ahead and get started. I think you and I really connected on the topic of how things are changing for the sales professionals in general. So I'd like to understand from you, from a business-to-business sales perspective, what do you see changing? What's going on?
Yeah, great. So, and some of this I say, people may start their eyes rolling, well, that's so obvious, but I've been in a vendor company in Cisco for approaching 10 years now, and the change is ridiculous. It's remarkable. And a lot of the change has been driven, of course, by this market transition towards cloud and software. And where infrastructure used to be king, it's now kind of table stakes. So it's all about the capability that can be driven using the technology, not the technology for its own right. So from a sales perspective, what we're trying to help customers understand, or we're trying to help to understand from our customers probably, is what outcome do you want, not what box do you want. And that's a very different type of conversation. So when I first landed in Cisco, I'd say that there's salespeople who didn't really need to sell. They were standing by the fax machine taking orders, right? Yes. Those days are gone. And so the challenge for the seller is very different now. They have to be comfortable with having a very much more open-ended conversation. This kind of outcome conversation starts with, what are your problems? Not, do you like the look of this shiny piece of tin? And that is a big change for many of the salespeople that we're working with.
Yeah, and that created a lot of discomfort. I can only imagine, given the pressures of quarterly earnings, the quota that they have, that they would want things to go according to a certain pace and a certain cadence of sequence of events. how do you address that? Because I think as a sales professional, how do I manage that stress?
Yeah. It's interesting. A lot of times in the technology industry, you hear people talking about managing change as having to change the engine of an aeroplane whilst that aeroplane is in flight.
Yes.
Because, the pressures of the street and, the earnings and, in the case of a company like Cisco, the weekly commits, the quarterly earnings cycles, you say, you can't afford to miss a beat. But at the same time, you have to be prepared that customers aren't necessarily willing, and in some cases able, to outlay the money that would be required in order to progress with certain technology projects. And we've all been through the kind of booms and busts. So you see the kind of expansion and then the contraction.
Yes.
So, and I think the last cycle of that really has corresponded with this move towards the cloud, the move towards consumption-based purchasing, which has a real difficult challenge because salespeople have to take control of their evolution, of being able to have that conversation, knowing that if they're focusing on the success of the customer at the end of the day, the dollars will come, the ability to retire the quota will come.
Yes.
But if you go in talking about the speeds and feeds and the shininess of the box, you may not be getting to the root of the problem and therefore being able to achieve the sale which everybody's looking for.
Absolutely, and I like what you just said about how, again, as an evolution and how customers consume technology, the cloud and X as a service really creates a different set of demands from a customer perspective. You could talk to that a bit more.
Yeah, I mean, I like to think about the problems that we hear from customers in three ways. And these ways you might say, well, hang on, I mean, that sounds like it might have been the same 10 years ago, right? And you probably have a fairly good argument to say that. But when we're talking to customers, we're listening to what's on their mind. What they need is help in three areas.
Yes.
So they want to make money. So they need help from vendors, partners, whoever can help them make money. They need some help in saving money, and well, okay, that's not very new, is it? Operational efficiencies and reducing costs and cost pressure, but they need help in that area. And they also need help in an area which you might say, well, this sounds a bit like outsourcing, but helping to kind of keep them out of trouble by taking control of things for them that give them trouble.
Yes.
But I would say that in this new move towards the cloud and this outcome-based world, that there probably are some shifts in those three areas. So maybe I can just touch on them for a minute. So in the area of making money, I think we have a new challenge because customers definitely need to look for differentiation.
Yes.
And technology doesn't differentiate just by investing in it. It's by doing something different. And so there's some really exciting areas that I think, all salespeople in this area have got to get their heads around. And, one of them, for example, is data management. So data is the absolute currency today. So customers can make it work for their advantage if they can get insights that drive differentiated strategies, right? But data is enormous. It's scary and it's difficult to handle, and storage is difficult, and aggregation and analysis. These are all tough things to get their hands around. But I think these are key topics which customers are looking for help with. I saw something last week which said that in corporate America, the number one job title by volume and by highest average salary available today is that of the data scientist.
Wow.
So, there are thousands of jobs available in that category. And that just says something about how much customers need help in that area. So I think making money with the idea of managing data,
yes,
I think this is a sweet spot salespeople need to really congregate around.
yes.
So maybe we can move on to the second area, which is saving money. And this is interesting. You talked a bit about X as a service and that stuff. So this whole move from CapEx to OpEx, It's not new. I mean, we've been talking about this in Cisco since I arrived, 8 and 9 plus years ago. But it's really important, particularly when you start to shed the dependencies on infrastructure and start to think about particularly software as a service and the capabilities that are available there, which are so nimble. I mean, I was talking to a client director who works with one of the largest banks in the world. I won't be naming them.
Yes.
And they are reducing their cost of keeping the lights on, which runs to billions of dollars a year.
Yes.
They want to reduce that cost over the next 3 years by 25%. And they want to do that by partnering with fintech companies who can develop and are developing really nimble, agile, customer-focused software solutions.
Yes.
And that's the change. So it's not just CapEx to OpEx, it's whole new category areas which are so customer-centric that they're doing things that are unimaginable. I think that's pretty exciting. Again, an area which, you know, salespeople may find a bit weird and scary because it might mean partnering with vendors who are not within your own company. You know, it might mean finding partners, technology partners who can do things with your capabilities. So I think that's a really exciting area in a new era of partnering that salespeople need to kind of grab onto.
Yeah.
Third area then, keeping me out of trouble.
Sure.
If I'm a customer, we talked about, outsourcing or managed service, whatever. Actually, the number one thing on our customers' minds, not surprising, is security.
Yes.
Cybersecurity is so enormously hot. I mean, it costs the jobs of CEOs if they get it wrong.
Yes.
It costs the money of individuals if they're the victim of fraud and crime themselves. I mean, we just saw quite recently the whole Yahoo issue as well.
Exactly.
So it's huge. It's hugely concerning. So I think if you're a vendor that can harness, and if you're a salesperson who can talk about security as a competitive differentiation alongside the conversation that you're having, that's just so huge. Customers want to know that you understand this and take it seriously.
Absolutely.
So those would be the 3 areas that I think are really hot, really changing, but that they tag on to those topics that are always top of mind for our customers: making money, saving money, and keeping them out of trouble.
Absolutely. And as you were talking, and I'm thinking about how for a long time we were telling the sales professionals, you need to get out of IT and talk to the line of business. And I think now with the cloud, maybe there is a requirement or a need to figure a way to actually talk to both of them at the same time, because if you put things in the cloud, you want to make sure that the IT organization is comfortable with all the different aspects that you need to take care of, the data and the security and the performance. And then from a line of business, they need the insights that they are going to get to help them increase the revenue, reduce their costs, and so on. How are you sort of managing that as you think about sellers?
Yeah, I mean, this is such a huge topic again, because all the data that I've seen would suggest that departments outside of traditional IT now have much more money to spend.
Yes.
And are spending much more money than the IT department on technology-based projects.
Yes.
And that's because technology can enable the sort of differentiation, the digitization of processes, of customer engagement in unimaginable ways. And so for a traditional sales account manager, let's say, who has talked to the IT department, who has had aspirations of being the friend of the CIO, now it may be as valuable to be very credible with the chief marketing officer.
Yes.
Or the head of facilities, or any other, the head of data, the head of customer experience. I mean, there's so many different job titles where, digitizing processes and capabilities can create differentiation for a customer. So if you're a salesperson, you're not addressing those audiences, that's not going to be great in the long term. So I think what we're trying to help in this context with our salespeople is thinking about, look, there's always going to be the relevance of the IT department. We need to make the CIO relevant. Yes. We need to keep them king for as long as possible with all those things you just talked about from a data perspective, from a security perspective, because, you know, they are still a huge, an important part of any of our client customers. Yes. But we have to also help our salespeople with the context of how to have different types of conversations with people who don't really understand technology as their number one language. Absolutely. Or who are really interested in a different outcome, and technology just happens to be the thing that might be able to get them there. So that requires a whole host of enablement tasks. Yes. It requires a whole host of insights that we need to serve up. And it also means driving our salespeople to different types of conversations and a different balance of how they spend their time. And I'm really getting at here the advent of social selling. Yeah. And, you know, we spend quite a lot of time chatting about social media and sharing content, which I get huge value out of. Yes. And this is something that the average salesperson is not necessarily always on board with as quickly as they might be. Sure. So I think this is a huge area where we've got to upskill our salespeople so they can begin to learn from the content and the conversations that their target customers, line of business people as well as IT, might be having, yes. As well as, you know, using it as a way of developing deeper engagement. So those, I think, are really important things now. And some salespeople probably rolling their eyes going, I'm not sharing all this stuff on social media, it's pointless, doesn't get me a result. And because the result is something that you have to win over time in this area, because it requires credibility to be built via longer term engagement.
That sounds very interesting. And I wonder, when you think about in the sales motion for a sales professional, what do they need to think about sort of in the very beginning? They have an opportunity to pursue, and then they have to sort of think about, how do I sequence my efforts? So in the process, I'm really interested in the customer success, but I also get to go through what I need to go through to get to the end of the line, if you will.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that there's a perfect kind of formula for this. All I would say is that you've got to get salespeople have got to get into more of a state of mind of continuous engagement and monitoring, yes. So that whatever conversation or whatever project or deal and whatever stage that they're at, because there's going to be more than one at any one time. Yes. Very few people are just working on one thing. That you have to get into this as a state of mind that it's constant and continuous. It's something that you build into your day so that you can see that, you know, if your customer is at the early stages of you know, talking about a project, and you know that you're not the only vendor in the frame, yes. That you can see what conversations, who's interacting with them. You know, there are lots of data capabilities that you can use actually to see, for example, who's visiting your website at what time and looking at what content, and how long are they dwelling and what are they downloading. And if you add to that, what are they doing in social media? You know, what are they sharing? What conversations? Who's interacting? Yes. It's all visible to you, but it takes time and you have to commit to it. And that's why building it into your daily process, whatever stage of a sales cycle you're in, I think is really, really important, because you can tell so much from a customer's state of mind about how they're interacting. Yes. But that's not something that is necessarily easy to serve up unless you're willing to commit and engage with it.
Absolutely. And in your mind, then it's not something that they can actually delegate to somebody else in that case.
Well, I think certain amounts of research could be delegated, but really, if you're interested in developing a relationship with someone new, Ash, you don't get someone else to do it for you.
Yeah, exactly.
You can't, you know, research and getting a temperature check or a pulse of a topic, of course you can, you could delegate some of that. But I think when it comes to the point of, right, I need to build this into my customer engagement strategy, that has to be you. Absolutely. It can't be anyone else.
It's part of basically your MO on a daily basis.
Yeah, and it's got to be in parallel with traditional means that the outside sellers would use in engaging with their customers.
Yes.
So, that doesn't mean that I'm never going to call anyone. I will not go and visit their offices and have a conversation, and I won't seek to do so because it's all taken care of on LinkedIn. Absolutely not. I mean, that would be ridiculous. But it's about being prepared to evolve, because one of the things I think is really clear is that even if you're a salesperson who thinks, well, I've been very successful for 20 years not doing this,
yes,
your competitors probably are already starting to do this. And I don't think you can take the chance that your deep relationships are going to count for something, because we all know our customers move on, they change jobs, they end up in different places.
Exactly.
And so the ability to really keep reinvesting in relationships in different ways is, I just think, so critical now.
Absolutely, absolutely. So in your mind, then, cold calling is dead. They probably don't need that anymore.
I don't think that's true necessarily. I think there's always a place for being bold and being relevant. So, you don't cold call with nothing to say, of course. You cold call if you've caught the idea of what a customer's trying to achieve, you've identified a change that you could help with or whatever. So you can certainly build that in, but I think blending it with some of these newer techniques and really it sounds a bit stalkerish, doesn't it? That you're kind of really focused on what your customer is up to. But in the world of, the new world of digital and social, so much is visible to us that was not visible before.
Exactly.
And it gives you an enormous advantage and can feed that cold call with so much insight that you wouldn't have normally had. So I think the two come together.
Absolutely. It makes a lot of sense. So when you think about sellers today, and to your point, a lot of the changes have actually overtaken us very quickly, especially how social media has evolved. So how can sales professionals sort of get into social selling and be comfortable with it while they are keeping an eye on their quota and what they need to accomplish on a quarterly basis?
Yeah, and I've sort of made messages and statements which make it sound like it could be quite time heavy as far as a commitment is concerned. And I think it can be. You can easily get yourself kind of locked into conversations and sort of surface the breath hours later. But I think most salespeople probably would want to control it a bit more than that. Yes. I think a place to start really is just think about which media you like to communicate via. For me, I honestly think the best conversations, as far as I see, are going on LinkedIn and slightly less so on Twitter for me. I think there are many other tools, of course, Facebook and others, which I don't think lend themselves so well to this. But pick the ones that you're comfortable with and make sure that your profile is up to date as far as how you want to, what your shop window is to the world, because that's what your profile is, after all. And once you've done that, you might want to see if your company will help you invest in a deeper set of tools. For example, LinkedIn has a tool called Navigator, which can take you deeper and help you into social selling. But maybe that's not where you want to start from initially. And then I think the thing is that to start sharing opinion or some content, even if it means tweeting or retweeting or sharing content that you've seen that you enjoyed from someone else, that doesn't take much bravery. It just takes a few clicks of a mouse. So I think sharing to start with is the way. And then when you start to get a bit bolder and a bit more familiar with the tools, of course, the idea of stepping into conversations with people and having dialogue around topics that you are interested in and are important to you, that's when you start getting engagement. And I think the important thing for salespeople is don't get involved in this and think it's like online dating.
Yes.
It's not Tinder.
Yes.
You can't go, I like the look of that customer and I'm going to swipe right and I really hope I'm going to get a date out of this. It won't be that quick. It requires commitment, and it requires you being properly interested in having a dialogue with your customer on topics that are important to them. If you've got a point of view that they find interesting, you will get a dialogue. And from that, you may well get an opportunity to have a call. That's happened to me quite a few times with people trying to sell to me,
Yes.
because I'm genuinely interested in their point of view.
Yes.
And that is no different if you're on the other side of the fence. And I think the final thing to say is, if this all sounds a bit creepy, it doesn't make you weird or desperate. This is not something that's a bit sad and this is for salespeople who can't sell.
Yes.
This is, I think, a requirement and an expectation that will increasingly become a core part of the sales experience. So just get stuck in and practice some of this stuff and see where it takes you.
Because a lot of, to your point, a lot of people are just getting used to the fact that that's how they are conducting the research. They're not depending only on reading a white paper as much as, to your point, really seeing what somebody's viewpoint is and understanding why they are looking at security differently than another company, and the approaches could be different. And then might be, to your point, something that then interests that customer to say, this is actually worth more of a conversation. I'm not going to learn as much from white papers as much as from talking with that sales professional. Makes sense.
And that's a different process, isn't it, than waiting for an RFP to land.
Yes.
And going, how can I help with this stated problem?
Yes.
Because quite often, if you have that consultative discussion, you'll realize that their problem might be very different from the one they think it is.
Exactly.
And that will then bring unimaginable opportunity to the conversation.
Absolutely. I want to think about, with all these changes, and I'm thinking about that salesperson, a lot of people who used to be, especially in high tech, where to your point, it is really at the very end of the deal, they are going to make sure that the distribution team and the shipping team is going to ship off these boxes. In this world today, there's typically, in most cases, there won't be nothing to ship actually, right? Because it's going to be a long-term service-oriented engagement. How are you seeing that change affecting sales professionals today and the interaction with the professional services teams? You know, how are they engaging, especially also when you think about social media? How can they make that shift?
Yeah, I think what you're starting to get at is the notion of customer success. And I think this is huge right now and should be huge in perpetuity, because quite honestly, if a salesperson spends so much time selling a dream or an outcome and that customer doesn't achieve it or doesn't feel like they have, then you've got a big expectation gap there, and you will not sell them more and you will not renew at the end of the cycle because the customer feels that they haven't got value.
Exactly.
So the big piece, I think, now is the whole customer success life cycle around, you know, adoption and then expansion and then renewal. And, you know, people who are looking for a good place to start on this topic should probably look at this book, which is the B2B book. Not, you know, it's been around for a few years.
Yes.
It's pretty well known, but it's got some very good and simple and obvious context, really, if you want to get into this, because it's so critical if you're looking at long-termism with your relationship with the customer, that you focus on this. Don't just go and sell, retire your quota and move on and hope that you get put onto a different account if it all messes up.
Yes.
You know, the importance of, you know, delivering that outcome is around looking at the customer's success with the solution or the service or whatever it is that you sold them. I think this is a discipline that is so critical today. And, you know, I see it in some of the things that I engage with. You know, if I have a bad first experience and I don't get beyond, you know, the third screen, I'm done, right? But if someone comes and helps me with that, then it's a whole different type of relationship, and I come away feeling much better than I did when I had the problem. And of course, you've got Salesforce and many other vendors who really focus very deeply on this, and that's incredibly important when you move into these long-term software-based relationships, particularly where customer success and the idea of renewal of a relationship is key.
Absolutely, and I think also it could be a nice blessing to have, because in the past, if all you did was send off the equipment and you said goodbye, you didn't really have the opportunity to get into the organization, get to know the business a whole lot more, which can actually open up opportunities for other services and sales opportunities.
Right, and that's really that whole expansion methodology, which is, okay, I'm starting from here, I've delivered this project, and now I unearth great opportunity because I stay interested. Exactly. And the interconnection of different projects and departments and problems lead to new opportunities that you may not hear about otherwise. So I do think it's critically important, and I think we can learn lots of lessons from some of those success stories that there are, where they focus so much on customer experience, knowing that satisfaction and that commitment to your brand is born of getting what you think you're buying in the first place.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it gets more relevant as well, because now you're not trying to think about what their needs could be. You're actually seeing what the real needs are, which is gives you a whole lot of effort. I want to take us to think about, as you were saying earlier, the whole concept of enablement. So as we think about all of what the sales professionals are going through, and of course, right along with them are the services professionals, what do you think then they need on the back end to help them succeed, in your mind?
Yeah, and so this is interesting. In the kind of B2B environment, there's this kind of weird construct called sales enablement. And who owns it? Well, it could be owned by marketing, it could be owned by operations, it could be a function in its own right, or it could be a combination of different people in different teams. But it's critically important. I mean, so much so that I'm actually collaborating with a bunch of people around the world, and we're formulating something called the Sales Enablement Society, which is trying to bring some kind of discipline, some shared learnings, and expertise to the function. So that's something that is probably much needed, because vendors spend a lot of money on this. It's not just training. It could be incentives, it could be collateral development, it could be tools and processes, lots of different parts that are part of this story. And I think that the big thing that we as people who do this for salespeople, and I'm one of them, need to make sure is we keep listening really hard to what salespeople need. Now, if I was to ask you and 100 other sellers, what do you need? I probably get 100 answers.
Yes.
So there needs to be certainly a lot of aggregation. So what I would say to the salespeople who are listening to this is, make sure that you are active and not passive in asking for what you need from sales enablement professionals or whoever owns this function. So here are some of the things I think you should be asking for.
That's great.
So number one, I think, is around soft skills. So we talked about this outcome-based, more consultative selling, not just about selling a box, it's selling an outcome. You need different consultative sales skills to do that than just learning about the speeds and feeds of a box.
Yes.
You need to be demanding that training if you're not getting it already. So I think that's really important. Second area, I think, is around industry insights. This could be market intelligence, it could be competitive intelligence, it could be getting access to tools like LinkedIn Navigator that we talked about earlier. It could even be just getting a ticket to a critical industry event that is attended by all your customers in a vertical industry.
Yes.
It's allowing you to get the insights that you need to be relevant. And it's important that you view all of those different sources as providers of those insights that you might need to have a good conversation with a customer.
Exactly, yeah.
Third area I think you need to focus on is very vertically aligned content and collateral. So if you're going into a sales conversation, what material or content or solution or angle do you need that is absolutely focused at the needs of your customer in that industry? And if you're so horizontal and generic and you can't demonstrate success or relevance to a vertical, you may struggle to have a relevant conversation. Yes. So I think that's something that salespeople can demand of their sales enablement business partners. And I think the final couple of areas are, one thing, if you're getting into work and projects that are much more outcome-based, that might require more of a different kind of consumption of the technology. So it's not sort of, I'm going to bill for the box and I'll be paid in 30 days. It might be, I'm billing on a monthly basis, or I'm not owning this, I'm not owning the box at all. It's all the service that I'm buying per user per month. Make sure you have the constructs that are repeatable provided within your business in order to deliver that. Otherwise, every deal will be a nightmare.
Absolutely. So you get some repeatability in terms of understanding how that kind of deal is negotiated, is sold,
yeah,
and then sort of cared for afterwards.
Yeah, and those guardrails are so important, because how much risk is your company willing to take? Well, you pretty much know that they will have an idea of what that is. So when it goes through finance or whoever's doing your approvals, they will have that in mind. Yes. If they can document that for you up front, it would save a lot of time to make sure that you're only pursuing deals which are likely to get done. The final area I think is really interesting is about partnering. So most of the customers we're talking to now, of course, they don't have a one single commitment to a certain vendor. They're working with multiple vendors. I mean, we talked about financial services earlier. We talked about these fintechs that are popping up who are doing unimaginable creative things that wouldn't be possible a few years ago. Those could be specialist partners to you. There could be best of breed consulting partners or integrators to work with. And I think if you can make sure that as a salesperson that you're demanding that the partner-facing teams are working to build those relationships according to what you need and share what you need, yes, then it's those types of conversations that are going to really help you with your customer. And when we've had this in Cisco recently, as we start to move into different mode 2 cloud type conversations with customers, we need different types of partners than we might have needed when we were just focusing on resale of infrastructure, for example. Exactly. So that, I think, is the final area I think salespeople should be asking for, that context around the right types of partners to deliver what their customers need.
Fantastic, Rebecca. We're almost kind of wrapping up, and I'd like to ask a couple more questions before we close out. I'd love to find out if, in addition to the book you were showing, if there are other books in your mind that are sort of talking to the changes that are taking place. What else besides the B4 book, if you don't mind? Yeah,
well, there's another, oh my gosh, there's so much out there. Yes. One thing that I think is really key right now is understanding, particularly we're kind of riding this wave of digitization. Everyone's talking about digitization of business. And the reality, of course, is that if your customers don't harness that, and if you're not helping them to do so, they could be one of the 40% of customers who are going to fall by the wayside and, probably go out of business. We've had so many examples through history of customers who've not been able to harness digital opportunity and have been killed by the next best technology or a remarkable startup who's done something unimaginable. So there's a good book actually that has come out of the Global Center for Digital Business Transformation, which is called Digital Vortex, which I think is a good place to start if you want to try and get your head around this whole notion of market disruption,
Yes.
to help you prepare you for those types of conversations with your customer and have some good examples to draw on. So I think that that's a good book to look at right now, which is very key as everyone, gets overexcited about digitization as a topic. So Digital Vortex.
Fantastic, wonderful. We'll shift. That's great. Thank you so much for sharing. Because I heard the title, but I wasn't sure if it was a book, and I'm glad that you've shared that with the audience if they want to really ramp up on what digitization could mean to their customers. Thank you so much. And before we close out, I want to come back to the fact that you and I have a common factor, which is our study of English literature. And I'd like you maybe talk to the sales professional who may have actually a daughter or a son who is thinking about college and they are struggling with what to study. And then in your experience and also in my experience, how we've evolved. So I'd like you maybe talk to what happens during college and your thought process, and then how you see yourself evolving based on some of the skills that you picked up.
Yeah, well, this is my pet topic, and I visit my daughter's school and do career talks on this type of stuff because a lot of people, when I go and do this in schools, right, the parents don't want me to talk to their children, because the children, for example, if the child is passionate about reading and learning but hasn't got a clue about what to do,
yes,
they don't like to be told, go and study what you enjoy. Now, in my case, that was reading. I had a fabulous time. I sat on my bed eating biscuits for 3 years. It was joyous. And I know that, probably my parents were sitting there thinking, what on earth are you going to do? That was an expensive 3 years.
Yes.
But I think what it teaches you is, firstly, the ability to completely self-motivate. I went to probably 2 lectures a term, and most of it was just about what my independent thinking was going to be about.
Yes.
So it teaches you independent thinking,
yes,
self-motivation, and organization in the face of volumes of material. Now, that sounds kind of very much like what I'm doing today, actually.
Exactly.
So parents who might be fearful and think, gosh, my child's never going to have a successful career in technology, or I'd love them to be an engineer, but they're not capable. I'm not capable of being an engineer either, by the way. But I can use some of those skill sets that I learned and I sort of taught myself by accident studying English literature.
Yes.
And you can have an extremely relevant career in technology or any other industry area. I've worked in lots of different industries, and the ability to cover lots of ground quickly and quickly assimilate information, that's a really great skill set to learn. And I got that from learning English, or reading English at university. So I would say there are quite a few different routes into careers, and a career in technology is infinitely possible, even as an English literature graduate.
From liberal arts, absolutely. Because a lot of people just basically think it's a very clear path from one line of study into a specific career. But to your point, it's the those logical capabilities that you develop, the independent thinking and critical thinking, and then ability to communicate and formulate ideas that are pretty much needed in a lot of industries. Everybody is going through a lot of change. They need people that help them understand what's going on around them. And I think hopefully that sends a message to some people that it's okay if they are, choosing a line of study that may not have a very direct relationship to a particular profession, that it's possible for people to evolve. Well, I want to go ahead.
Yeah, and just one final point on that is the thought of not doing something you enjoy for that length of time, like 3 years or 4 years, or in the UK where I'm from, typically it's a 3-year degree course. not doing something you love for that period of time, just as spending 3 years doing a job you didn't enjoy would seem like a hellish amount of time.
Exactly, yes.
It's really important you select something that you enjoy spending your time on.
Exactly. It makes a lot of sense because life is precious, so you might as well do something that you enjoy. So,
yeah.
I want to thank you so much, Rebecca. I think the conversation had some insights for a lot of people that are going through a lot of change around them, whether even they are, working in high tech or in even other industries. I think the whole concept of digitization is affecting all of these industries. So I think definitely even people listening in who may not be working in high tech would benefit from the conversation we just had. I really appreciate you joining me. Thank you so much. And again, thank you also for sharing some of your personal thoughts and some of the books that you've shared with us as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's been great talking with you, Ash. I've really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to the Top 1% Sellers Factory podcast. Give us your suggestions and guest recommendations by emailing us at ash@connectwithash.com. Thank you also for sharing this podcast with your colleagues and social media contacts. To connect with us on LinkedIn, please send a connect request to ash@connectwithash.com. See you at our next episode. Thanks for tuning in.